Lovely.
Kia ora, Jenny. How nice to see you today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for meeting with me. When I was looking through what people's topics were, I felt that there might be something that we could learn from with each other and maybe give each other some support.
Lovely. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so if I tell you what my title is, and
You could take some notes as well if you don't mind. So yeah.
of course. So I'm working particularly with one school here in Pukekohe, and
Right.
I'm looking at how to support new whānau to the school feel a sense of belonging. Now, when I did my Voice 2, which was a whānau focus group, 2/3 of them were new to New Zealand. And every single one of the whānau group, except for one, had English as the second language. So it was the bilingual aspect of your work that really interested me and made me think that we probably got something to connect with.
Yeah.
Can you remind me of your topic?
So my topic, I don't know, I've got it written down on the computer, so it might take me too long. So basically, I'm looking at families, whose first language isn't English, speak a different mother tongue, and where it's come from is this thing that when we work with those families, we say to them, oh, keep your mother tongue going, just keep speaking that language at home and then do English at school. And they all sort of politely often say yes. And this lady I was telling you about, she actually kind of alerted me to the fact that that's actually really hard, and a lot of them don't and can't. So mine is about looking at bilingual families and the choices they've made, the decisions they've made about whether they're going to speak English at home or first language at home, and kind of what affected those decisions, and like kind of moving forward, how did they think that's going to affect their engagement and achievement at school? So yeah, it's more about
that's really interesting, because that's one of the things that we said in the whānau focus group. Are you still using your own language at home? And people were saying, oh yes, they were, but I'm wondering whether that was what they thought we wanted to hear.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the challenges that came out from some of the families I talked to was they feel that there's a barrier for language, is a barrier when they enroll their children, not in terms of filling out the forms necessarily, but when they come into the school, whoever they meet with speaks to them as though they understand everything that's being said and the terminology. And so I think there might well be a tendency to just say yes politely and agree, because it must be a very, very challenging situation. The other thing that they talked about was not understanding the education system here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
They're surprised that where are the textbooks? Where's the timetable that says my 7-year-old's doing science and history? And, it's many of them are used to a much more formal setting for education. So you can see how, given that, their instinct would be to improve on the English, because they want their children to be able to succeed. They've brought their family here to New Zealand for a reason.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you. We don't want these children losing their culture and their identity in a bid to actually fit in.
Absolutely. So then you've got the children, though, they see at school that to make friendships, they need to speak English. To even work, they need to speak English. I mean, it was just interesting, because having done the Voice 1, the literature review, the thing that it's revealed, kind of looking at other kind of case studies of families, including in New Zealand, is how when they're very young and they're in early childhood, they want to do it and they're very keen to do it. But it seems to be once they get into primary school, where the children then have that desire to make friends and things, and the parents often will see English as like the language of success, you know, like, so they want them to do well. And they sort of talk about how initial signs are things like if siblings start talking to each other in English, that's a sign that it's all kind of falling down, really, you know. If they start to use English in sort of heritage stories and so forth, you know, things like that. So there was that importance about them not only maintaining their language at home, but having people to talk to and how they can immerse them in the language and keep them talking. Because they identified that if they're talking in English at home, chances are it's because their first language isn't good enough to communicate now or something. Well, so it's the parents trying to keep all that going on top of everything else that they're going through.
Absolutely, because then we're, you know, if we add into the mix that they've just arrived in a new country, they might be dealing with immigration and visas. They've got to find somewhere to live. They've got the cost of living. They've got to find work. There's so many pressures. They haven't got family. They can be very isolated. Culturally, New Zealand is very different for them. So yes, this is yet another thing. That's really interesting you mentioned that, because so I had families from a wide range of countries. There was the Philippines, there was Sri Lanka, Zimbabwe, India, South Africa. Those are just the ones I'm remembering off the top of my head. And that came up with the South African families, that very quickly the children dropped Afrikaans and speak to each other in English. So of course, coming from South Africa, they will have learnt both languages, and so they quickly abandoned the Afrikaans in favor of the English. And it will be about, you know, wanting to fit in and make friends. So it's a challenging one, isn't it? Because how do we actually overcome that?
It's really hard, isn't it? And also my feeling was, because I've been saying for ages, you know, because I did all TESOL, you know, ESOL and things like that, and that's kind of been my area. And I've just sort of sang like a canary going, oh yeah, do your mother tongue at home. And like you said, they all go, oh yes, yeah. And I found that a lot of them they may not even have the language to explain to me how hard it is. But my thinking as well, when you were talking about that, who do the parents practice their English on? You know, they've come to a new country, they want to learn how to speak English as well. Now, if you're speaking mother tongue at home, unless they go to language lessons, but they need to practice. So in a way, the home environment is a good one for them to practice their English and learn how to, and often children are learning it more than the parents, so the parents are learning it off the children. So in a way, you can see for them, that's a huge learning opportunity to learn English. And we're saying, oh, no, speak your mother tongue. And
you're really right, because I hadn't even considered that. And I'm thinking, I can picture one of the lovely mums that came to my whānau focus group. And she said, I'm so proud of my daughter. Her English has got so good since she's been coming to school. And then she said, my English isn't good. It actually was extremely good, but she feels that she lacks the confidence. And yeah, you've come up with the perfect solution. Why shouldn't she practice in her home with her daughter, who's coming on leaps and bounds, and they can learn together?
Yeah. So it's hard to fight, isn't it? It's hard to say to them. I mean, I think from my reading, they have to really, really value like the bilingualism and the biculturalism. They have to value it and really want to do it and have like a plan in place, because otherwise it sounds like really it won't work. But then the reason when I was speaking to this bilingual support lady, the part of our conversation was because I'd said this, speak this at home. And she said to me, actually, we speak English at home. And she explained that a friend of hers also spoke the same first language, and she had enforced their first mother tongue at home. And one of the boys became an elected mute. He did not want to speak it at home. So it kind of shows as well that you can have this plan, but it can all go really wrong. And you can put them off it. So it's about how you sustain it and maintain it at home, but in a way that they feel they want to do it and they see the value of it, and they're proud of.
Absolutely. So what I'd
Mm,
say to that is, you know, school has a part, we all have a part to play in ensuring that they feel pride in their
mm,
culture and their first language. Because if he
mm.
didn't want to speak it, he wasn't feeling a sense of pride. That
No.
wasn't part of his, this is how I belong. And so I
And I
think,
think also, wanting to speak better English as well, that need to
yeah,
develop relationships, to want to be social. Because I think he was a bit older. He sounds like he may have been kind of middle high, intermediate
mm,
high. That that desire to learn really quickly and become part of the group.
yeah, which is
Mm,
completely understandable, particularly in those teenage years where we know, conformity to the group is very important. One of the things that I'm toying with that came up from the whānau focus group was they would like to be able to connect up with other people who come
mm,
from the same place or speak the same language. Um, and I was considering, liaison people in the school. So somebody who's been there for a number of years and, maybe speaks Hindi, can support others who are new. Um,
yeah.
and we talked about setting up little, almost like social groups,
Mm,
but they don't want a social group that's just their language. They want to get to know people in the
mm,
wider community, which is just like their children wanting to speak English. They too want to be able to connect to the community and the culture that they've moved to, which
yeah.
since you and I have both
Mm,
emigrated here, and was I do still have some English friends in New Zealand, but most of my friends now are Kiwis. I no longer just hang out with the English people I know.
or
You,
other immigrants. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Because they suggested I move to a place called Titirangi. I don't know if you know it, in West Auckland.
yes, I
There's,
do
there's,
know. Yeah,
there's lots of English people there. You'd love it. And I was sort of thinking, I didn't really come to to group myself with a lot of English people. Do
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's part of why we're here, isn't it? Is
yeah,
to meet everybody, and this
exactly.
huge cultural mix that is New Zealand. It's just,
Mm,
I wouldn't want to just,
no.
see that kind of grouping.
Right.
So
So it's
yeah.
finding that balance, isn't it? Because I love the liaison idea to support, say, new families coming in, to understand the education system, the enrollment process, how the school works. But going forward, if you were going to do sort of connect groups, I think you'd want to make it across cultures and languages.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if you've come across, there's um, these groups of people in Auckland where they're beginning to do this. I think it's mostly due through like the refugee and migrant service, but where they tend to use schools and things as a kind of base for different language groups to meet, or different. So like there'll be this Sri Lankan kind of group
Yeah.
and things like that. So they have access to people that speak the same language, but it's sort of scattered around Auckland, I think. So different places.
Mm,
But I think that's useful. Like you said, they want information how to recruit at school, their children at school, or how do things work here, to have someone in their first language explain it all as from the perspective of an immigrant.
mm.
But yeah, definitely to have a group there that they can then mix with and share experiences and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's really helpful that you mentioned that, because um I might consider contacting them and seeing if
Mm.
they can give me any advice.
I can
Um,
send you I'll send you the email if because they're trying to
yes,
because it's
please.
not an
Yeah.
email, it's like, please share our information, because they're trying to go out far and wide to make more people aware, I think, and draw more people into their,
Yes, please, Jenny. That would be great if you don't
Oh,
mind
do.
sharing that.
Yeah.
That would be so
Yeah.
helpful. I can explore that, because I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go yet.
Mhm.
Because I only just gathered my voice through this morning, which was the students, and I did it in a survey, quite a challenging situation to try and get the students that you want to be able to participate in the survey, because the consent form itself is something of a barrier.
Oh, yes, yes.
Mm.
You're absolutely right. I also felt as well that things like, because I was going to do a focus group of parents, but because of all the delay with My Voice 2 and things, I just thought I'd just do a single voice 3. But when I started to look at the group, I was thinking, these parents that I invite, they're going to be parents that are confident to speak English, because they're going to go into a focus group speaking English and things like this. And I started to think, am I really capturing all the voices? I won't be capturing the voices of the parents who have perhaps maintained first language to the point where they don't feel confident in their second language to join a focus group in English, rather, so it's really hard, isn't it, to make sure that it's not fair, but accessible.
Absolutely. So what we did, because I just focused on one school, and what we did was there was a lot of emphasis on please bring a support person. And so a couple of people did.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
And that worked quite well. So the support person would help them translate.
Yeah, that's a really lovely idea.
Yeah. And I think that could be used more just generally in schools for new families.
And maybe if you were kind of really going for it, maybe a translation of the consent form or something.
Absolutely.
But I mean,
Going forward, yeah.
my thought was I was going to have different languages there and different levels of English, and it started to occur to me that I think I wasn't I kind of started to withdraw from it a little bit anyway, thinking I'm not sure about this at all. And like you say, that just the whole, I hadn't even thought about the consent form, how hard that would be, and they're consenting to something they might not even understand fully.
Absolutely. As when we started the group, I went back through what they had signed and gave them the opportunity to, withdraw consent, because I felt that they were vulnerable to that. So it's a real challenge, isn't it? When you dig deeper and the people you actually really want to talk to. So for the students, I've surveyed all of them, or all that gave consent, which was actually quite a few. So I got 70 children who filled out the survey today. But the ones I really want are the ones that are new to the country. So, but I discussed that with Wendy. It's not manner enhancing for children to be drawn out. Right, well, you're new, so we're going to put you in this room and you're going to fill this out. So I went about it that way. Now I've got to work out how to sort of sift things in Google Forms, because that's all a learning curve. But we'll
it's
get there.
really, I mean, and that on top of everything else. But I totally agree, because chances are the children you really want to hear the voice of are the ones who don't want to fill out the form, or can't fill out the form, or don't even understand what it is, the survey rather. So it's incredibly hard, isn't it? And to, even when you think, because like when we do the bilingual assessment, we bring in a support person, that speaks their language, and we have to check there, do they know each other? Are they happy? Because there's obviously going to be confidential information that comes out. Do they know this person? Are they happy for this person to be, their translator and things? But it just means they always have to go through another person. They have to share their story. And here we are in, that power relationship, there's a lot of pleasing tries to happen, I think, where they don't know the system well enough, and they don't have enough language or confidence to kind of question things or challenge things, or, all of that. I feel that they must feel very powerless at the beginning.
Yeah, I would feel very overwhelmed if I was in a meeting like that and I had to go through somebody else. You never, you're trusting that person that they're actually then expressing what you've said. And if your English is really limited, you can't really tell whether they are actually doing justice to what you say. Going back to the getting the consent forms from the children, what they used the Dojo app at this school, and those parents are encouraged to use the translate option. And the whānau group that I met with, they are using that translate option.
Lovely.
And
Okay.
yeah. So that was interesting,
Mhm.
that they're using it and they find it useful. And so I asked all the teachers to communicate with the parents, to tell them about this consent form that was coming home and remind them about it on the dojo rather than an email, because then
Mm.
I knew that at least they could translate. They got a bit of information about who I was, what it was there, to then, you know, make the form a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
And I suppose AI is going to do wonderful things for us. We're going to be able to put these forms in to AI
Mm.
and get it translated. But of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
you need to know all your languages. And when I was starting this process, I didn't feel like I had you know, how can I legally find out all, you know, if I'm being specific about families,
Mm.
it's tricky, isn't it? About
Yeah.
what their first language is. And sometimes the school are a bit unsure.
Yeah.
Sometimes what people have written on their enrollment form and what the reality is different, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And, we have as well where you've got two parents that speak different languages.
Mm.
And again, that was on one of the children I did an assessment with, where they actually speak English at home because mum speaks one language, dad speaks another. So their common language is English when they're together at home.
Yeah.
So if you ask them on a form, what language do they speak at home? They'll probably write English, whereas
Yeah,
do they?
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's probably more common than we even realize, isn't it?
And a lot of them think that's the right answer. But then again, then we say, oh no, use your mother tongue at home. So they might write their mother tongue, but they can't because they don't communicate in the same language. So
Yeah.
it feels a little bit that power relationship. I started to think about that we're telling them what to do. And this is me, I don't speak another language at home. So me telling them what to do at
Yeah.
home.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's we're not walking in their shoes. We don't know the reasons why they, you know, we've discussed it today, why we think they might prefer their children to speak English. But yeah, we're not in their situation to be able to tell them what to do and why they should do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're completely immersed in English, and they're going to be watching English television or reading
Mm.
English books, where everything is going to be English, and telling them, oh no, keep speaking Samoan or something at home.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yes.
uh,
Well,
have you got any ideas about what you're going to do then? Because you sound like you've got some already in place.
have I got any ideas yet? I want to do something around the bilingual families. So they weren't yeah, I feel that there's the biggest thing that came out of that voice was that they feel that it's very hard to connect and feel a sense of belonging. A lot of them hadn't come to the big event that the school had in the first term,
Oh,
but
yes. Yeah.
they came to my small group. So with a lady who's not even actually a teacher at the school. So it tells you what they're drawn to. That
Yeah.
small group seems safer.
Yeah.
So I suppose I'm thinking about that. I was also wondering about having videos that were available in people's mother tongue that they could find out more about the school and the education system.
Mm.
I'd really want members of the school community to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And you're not, I need to see what my voice 3 tells me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not quite at that stage yet, are you?
I'm not, although interestingly, because we were doing the bilingual assessment and we'd understood about what was happening at home, we kind of myself, because we work in pairs when we're doing an assessment, we'd already started to have a conversation to say, what can we do about this? So right back at the end of last year, we've kind of been turning over ideas.
Mm.
And so when I've been reading, I've been looking as well with a view to see what worked, what appeared to work. So I'm sort of thinking, because there's two branches of it. It's about maintaining their culture and maintaining their language. And
Yeah.
what they're saying is that you can't really express the intricacies of a culture without the language. And that is so true, is it? Because I sort of think of our English culture, and I think about, like the food. I mean, like we have mint sauce still with everything, and Yorkshire pudding, and
Yeah. I
all
thought of
those.
Yorkshire puddings as soon as you said that. We
Yes.
have to make them now.
Yeah, and how do you but how do you do that if you're speaking another language? How do you put York, I'm sure, I don't know if there are words for Yorkshire pudding, or if you can, I don't know, those sorts of things.
And think of all the English expressions.
Yes,
My
yes.
father was full of expressions.
Same, my mother. Yep,
Mm.
yep. And some of them I come out with here and people think I'm mad. They think, oh, what is she saying?
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah. And you can't transmit any of it. All of that is getting lost.
Yeah.
So when we did this BSP, we were doing where they read a story, and the child in first language, and the child kind of tells them back what the story was about and so forth. And we had a couple of books there, but she said to me, oh, I've got lots of reading books at home from my children. Do you mind if I bring in some of those? And we were like, yeah, lovely. They were beautiful because this was actually Russian. They were Russian, I guess, like fairy tales, but they were immersed in the culture of Russia, so we didn't know what they were, but there was like one with a witch and doing something or whatever in a house. But apparently they're very traditional. Every Russian child knows these stories, but this child won't know them because he's not been, and he's actually from Kazakhstan, but they speak Russian. But it was, it's still very much because we checked with mum, and so we realized that literature was a really good way in. And a lot of the people that had success, and the ones who are in Auckland having success, they're doing where they're sharing first language books, but then they're like, how can I say, like immersed in the culture of the first language, where they're about, say, China or whichever country. It's not just an English text translated into Chinese.
Yeah, I get
So
exactly what you mean.
yeah, so I was sort of looking at doing a program there to and try it first of all on this parent because have you ever heard of the HPP? Have you done HPP, where you do the picture book language building? To
Yes.
do that, but to teach them how to do that in their first language, so that even if they're not talking during the day, they can have a lovely time where they just sit and they have a traditional book, or immersed in that culture, and talk about the text, introduce the vocabulary, read the story, do that whole process, but teach the parents how to do it in first language, just so that they can, it can lead on to other conversations, and it can draw in,
and keeps that language alive, and also keeps that culture alive. And the two, as you say, are linked. Yeah, that's
and it gives the child special time, with the parents, and it's hopefully done in a nice way, so it's not, because I was thinking about the boy who just stopped talking, done in a way where he would perhaps value it, but they can talk English at the other times, because this family had to talk English, because they couldn't communicate otherwise. So yeah, so I'm going to try that, and seeing the literature, like I say, it does look like that books are a really good way in, and I know a lot of really here, and I'm sure in Pukekohe they would have multi-language texts and things like that.
Yeah, I really love that idea. You've given me quite a different perspective on the whole thing, because I hadn't really even considered that aspect of losing their language. Yeah, so it's made me really think about even if just taking it back to the school, how important that is, given that we've identified that so many of the new families are coming from other countries. And yeah, how can the school get on board with that too? How can they make sure not just the odd, it's a cultural day, but there needs to be more than that, to ensure that there's pride in your culture, and that you're having the opportunity to share who you are And then coming back to what you've said about the books, that would be a great thing for them to
They
share
could share.
back at school. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the teachers could even incorporate something like that in their topic plans or
Yes,
whatever.
definitely.
'Cause
Yeah.
in one of my classrooms, because I used to teach in West Auckland, in one of my classrooms, it was really interesting because I had a little boy from Africa. I'm trying to think which part of Africa, but he'd come as a refugee family, and he said something about, can I tell the other children about like what it was like in Africa? So I'll go for it. So he just sat on this chair and, to be the teacher, and they all sat down. And he told us, he was saying, I remember at night we would all lie in, it sounds quite sort of desert-like, and in the distance we could hear the lions roar. And we could tell how far they were away and things. And the children were captivated.
They
And then
would
the next
be.
day, can I tell my story? And they would come individually and just talk about what life was like. And the other children could ask them questions and things. And I think it's about opening up those conversations, because Tess Soul learnt me a lot about not being the policeman that kind of controls all the conversation, but allow that across child talking, and so things like that. We started to introduce a lot of that just to get them talking to each other. And you can just be such a great listener. It just gives you the opportunity to go, wow. And we realize how like small our lives are really compared to,
And then you build, the teacher builds an understanding of that child. So that builds into the relationship that they've got with that child. So it's win-win, isn't it, in many ways?
Yeah.
Building
And we did
positive relationships.
one might talk about kind of coconuts. I remember one boy from Tonga, I think it was, we used to go and collect coconuts. And then the others were like, we used to collect coconuts, and they would talk about what they used it for, how they processed them, all of those conversations that would come out. And you suddenly realize that so much of what you're doing in the classroom doesn't really connect with their prior knowledge, what they're bringing with them and things like that. So,
and that's what we want to do. We want them to feel that sense of belonging and connection. So the more we know about them, the more teachers can do that.
But I love what you've told me, see, about when you say about the admin. I hadn't thought of that side. I always think about the children in the classroom, but I hadn't thought about that whole process of parents coming into the school, and those initial hurdles. And of course, we're saying to them, we value English, and English is an important language, and all the information that comes to you is going to come at you in English. That's what we're telling them. So of course they're going to be thinking that. And then we say, oh no, but you keep speaking, the tongue at home. But we don't help them.
We'll keep throwing all this English stuff at you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to get on at all. We're not going to help you in any way at all. And that's another thing they talk about in the readings, is about the school being there to sort of basically help the family, to sustain the language and to give the children opportunities. I don't know as well if you're aware of the dual language texts that you can get from down the back of the chair. I don't know if you've seen those as well.
No, I haven't.
They're only
in much work in ESOL, so
okay.
So dual language texts.
Yeah, so it's the ready to read books.
Yeah.
But what they do is they'll pick out ones that are particularly appropriate, say to Tongan or Samoan or whatever, and it's literally the original ready to read in English one side, and you turn it upside down and it's in Tongan or Samoan. And like I said, I think they've done all the Pacific Islands. So unfortunately, it would be lovely if we could do them in so many more.
Absolutely, it'd be wonderful.
Yeah, so with the HPP thing, what I did with one family, because the boy's language wasn't developing, so I was speaking with a speech and language therapist, and we thought what we could do is develop the home language, and you kind of go, okay, but how do we do that? We've got a really busy family, single parent. How do they develop that? So we sent the books home in Tongan, and the mum would read it to them and to the boy first in Tongan, and they'd have all their conversations, and then he'd bring it to school, and we had a teacher aide who would like talk to him about what they talked about in Tongan, and then he would read the English version, and they'd make the links between the English. So we were kind of building up both languages simultaneously. Wonderful. And it became a whole thing with the whole family, because they became so excited to see these books that were like immersed in Tongan families or Tongan, like it might be they went to church or they were cooking dinner or something, but it was so, and they're all free from down the back of the chair, and you can get multiple copies, because this lady said, can I have a copy for my cousin? So I ended up kind of sending the whole, because they sent us 10 of every single book type